Run.
What if we were to say we could increase TJX's profits by $600,000 through our expansion in just 5 stores in the greater Boston area, accumulating to $70 million through our expansion all over America in just 10 years? Now that I know you're listening, we are Cconsign, soon to be America's most successful consignment operation. I'm Jennifer James.
My name is Grace Alisa.
I'm Kieran Davis.
I'm Josh Glickman.
And I'm Nat Wirt. Our proposed title is Max Vintage, which will attract a younger customer base by selling consigned items from Cconsignment's established network of consigners. What is consignment? Consignment begins when the consignor gives the clothes to a store or the consignee, but the consignor retains ownership of the item until it is sold. A revenue split is typical between the consignor and the consignee in this industry at a rate of usually 60 to 40 or 70 to 30, with the consignor receiving the smaller portion. Differences with Cconsignment are that we only list our items online. We don't have physical stores, we just have our warehouse. We have very high buying standards than typical consignment. For example, we only take vintage items. And the consignor will be compensated when the items are sold to TJX with this proposal, not when they're sold to the end consumer. And TJX will gain revenue from marking up the purchase price from what we sell it to them. So that doesn't have anything to do with the split between us and the consignors.
Now you're probably wondering, why buy vintage? Well, vintage clothes are a more affordable and sustainable way to shop. However, they're also more desirable in other ways. For example, vintage denim is a great example of something that customers typically buy vintage. This is because vintage denim is typically of higher quality than denim that you would find in a store today, and it's also perfectly distressed and worn in the way that only a well-loved pair of jeans could be.
So our business model involves these 4 parties, but it all starts with a consignor who gives their desirable vintage or designer items to us so that we can use them to build our inventory. TJX then purchases items from our inventory to sell on store floors under the TJ Maxx Vintage label. In exchange, we receive sales revenue from TJX, of which we keep 60% for ourselves and give the remaining 40% to the consignor whose items were sold to TJX. We decided on the 60-40 split because we felt that the 40% revenue to the consignors was enough incentive to incentivize them to give their clothing to us to sell, and the 60% is enough for us to turn a good profit considering that we have very low costs, given that we don't actually manufacture our own clothes.
Now for our value proposition. As stated before, Cconsignment helps increase TJX's revenue and widens their target market to include younger women who are both fashion and environmentally conscious. Now for the consumer, we make unique sustainable fashion more accessible and affordable through our partnership with TJX. This saves our customers time and money. Finally, the value that we gain for this is that Cconsignment is establishing itself as a staple in the consignment industry by partnering with retail giant TJX. This allows us to reach the new generation of consumers, college-age young women in the Boston area, as we will detail later on. Our keys to success mean that we must have a dedicated base of consigners that will continue to grow in the future. We need large volumes of clothes to keep up with TJX's demands. These clothes must conform to current trends and also align with future trend forecasts. Our customers must also continue to have an appetite for trendy, affordable clothes. We don't anticipate this being an issue though, because customers do currently react well to the TJX treasure hunt experience. Our business model aligns perfectly with this treasure hunt experience, since when you're buying vintage, it's very unpredictable. So this drives customers to the store to see what's available at any given moment.
So we conducted a survey using Qualtrics to determine who our ideal target customer is, and I'll just give you a few highlights from the survey of the important points that we found. So we had 36 participants, the majority of whom were female, and all of them were between the ages of 16 and 24. When we asked them if they ever bought or sold clothing from a consignment company before, 64% responded they had, which is pretty ideal because it shows that there's not going to be a significant learning curve in adjusting to consignment companies, but there still is a large enough portion of people that presents a prime opportunity to expand into. Next, we asked how much they value sustainability in their purchases, and we found that 80% had moderate to high consideration for sustainability, which falls right in line with what we're offering with consigned clothing. Next, we asked how much they are interested in thrift shopping, And while consignment is definitely not thrift shopping, we think the strong interest in thrift shopping will translate really well to consignment, since it sort of fosters a similar shopping experience. And then lastly, we asked how much they value price when buying clothing. And overwhelmingly, we found that they definitely place a large value on price, which is perfect for us because we offer really desirable vintage items at a much more affordable price.
So after we finished our Qualtrics survey, we established that our ideal consumer is a young woman between the ages of 15 and 24, of middle to high income, but most importantly, she's interested in sustainable, vintage, affordable fashion. So then we wanted to get a grasp for how many of these women we have. So we did a market analysis, starting with a total available market of our whole country, narrowing it down based on location, age, gender, income. We finally came to the conclusion that there are 15,000 women in the Boston area that we can get to come to one store. So that's a huge increase in foot traffic that we can offer to one TJ Maxx, which on the next slide, we decided that the best place to start would be on Newbury Street, where most women go to shop for like more than just one store. If they're gonna go and pop into a bunch, it's gonna be on Newbury Street. However, we wouldn't just stop there. We would quickly want to expand into the rest of the Boston area, looking at downtown Crossing and then into Cambridge. And then after that, New York, Los Angeles, and in the whole country.
So when it comes down to our competition, we looked at our potential competitors by looking at businesses who are operating in the same service of consignment, and that gave us a list of these 6 potential competitors. So then to further analyze the competition, we looked at 2 factors, which were proximity, so how closely located our competition was to us, but also popularity, so how well known the brand was. And that allowed us to come to the conclusion that Revolve Boutique is our biggest competitor. So Revolve Boutique is not the largest, but one of the largest consignment stores in all of New England, and it's also located in Newbury Street. For the sake of time constraints, I will not be going into each of the factors in the SWOT analysis, but I will be addressing how we're planning on overcoming our competition and how we differentiate ourselves. So firstly, we have a different unique selling point. So Cconsign prides itself in its affordability, whereas Revolve Boutique is known for its luxury items, and with that comes a limited flexibility with pricing. And our second differentiation is that we're targeting different market segments. So while we're looking at students, whether high school students or college students within the age range of 15 to 24, Revolve Boutique identifies as an upscale women's consignment boutique, so it's addressing more middle-aged women. And finally, our historical success and experience within this industry render us more competent, and in the long term, this can allow us to factor in brand loyalty as well to attract more customers. Now, a question that a TJX representative or a investor might have is, why are you planning on locating your store right next to your competition? And our answer to that is we're simply delving into strategic placement. Drawing on a common example of McDonald's and Burger King, they're always closely located to each other, and that's the same logic we're applying here. So for us, one of the reasons we're doing that is because our market research costs can be cut down drastically. And on top of that, when you look at the psychology behind women, they're often hopping in and out of stores looking for the most affordable prices. And affordability is what we're known best for. So that's something Revolve will not be able to compete with us in.
So about the financials, just to give a sense of the timing, we're going to have our startup period in the spring 2020, and then expect to become fully operational in the fall of 2020, and then our break-even point, and then entering a payback period will both be in 2021. As for TJX, we project that they're going to profit around $70,000 annually for each participating store. We arrived at that number by estimating that we're going to send around 200 items per every shipment to TJX. And then knowing that TJX completely overturns the inventory about 14 times per year, we estimate 14 shipments per year to each store. And then to determine the margin, we project that on average, each item that we're selling TJX will go for around $25, and that they can resell those items in store floors for around $50. So given that profit margin and the amount of items we're sending per year, we arrived at the $70,000. And that means that by 2022, when we expect to be in 5 stores in the Boston area, the TJX is going to profit $350,000 in that year. And that's not counting the additional sales from extra foot traffic as a result of customers coming in to buy clothes from the Max Vintage label. As for revenues, I'm not going to go through each number for the sake of time, but you can see that as we expand into more stores, our revenues rapidly increase. And the same holds for TJX, that as we put our products into more of their stores, they're going to bring in more revenue. As for our expenses, we have very few capital expenses. Most of it is operational. We incur about $8,000 of capital expenses in the startup period. And then as we progress throughout time, we expect our expenses to increase as we expand our business. And the same holds true for TJX, given that the more products they're purchasing from us as we go and enter more stores, the higher their expenses will become. And then regarding financing, in any period where we have cash requirements, 25% of it will be funded by owners in exchange for equity, 25% from friends and family in exchange for equity, and the remaining 50% we finance via bank loan. Once we enter our break-even period in 2021, we will start repaying the bank loan as well as repaying the friends and family. And then you can see here that in 2021, as we start repaying them, the total debt starts to decrease.
As for the supply chain, Cconsign owns and operates one 10,000 square foot warehouse in Framingham, Massachusetts. This has enough space for us to grow into this partnership with TJX, so we don't plan on needing larger space anytime soon. Consigners get their items to Cconsign by printing their labels, mailing labels, from cconsignment.com/consign, and we have a consigner portal where they're able to easily access information regarding their items, the status, whether it was rejected or accepted, and it's very easy for the consigner, and they pay for the shipping. Consigners are then emailed their acceptance status of their items. It's also accessible in the portal, or the rejection, why their item wasn't accepted. And our items are all inventoried using Consign Pro. However, we plan to work with TJX to inventory items to save time on their part, so that way both of us aren't wasting time in inventorying items twice. The initial shipments will be made by the Cconsignment team. However, we later plan to switch to UPS. But for now, we have purchased a van to make these shipments to the locations, TJX locations in Boston. These will be bi-weekly deliveries, and TJX will be responsible for adjusting the prices and displaying the inventory or putting it out on the floor in their stores. And the end of the supply chain is finally reached once the customer falls in love with the product.
So our proposed brand, Max Vintage, is a collaborative effort, and we would mostly use co-branding between our established brand, Cconsignment, and TJ Maxx to really drive in a lot of demand for this product. So in the case that TJ Maxx is not willing to use any of their marketing resources to help this brand succeed, we have set aside $10,000 for our first year to really get this brand going. We're mostly going to focus on digital advertising, using native advertisements in our website, but also using social media, mainly Instagram, through influencers, which I've laid out in the next slide. So these are women in the Boston area. They're in our target range, and they have a lot of influence over girls in this area, and we think that this would be a low-cost option to drive a lot of like real interest through almost like word of mouth or like through a friend. But these women, having 250,000 more followers, do have a large reach in this area. So then, given we have a successful deal with TJ Maxx, with you guys, we would want to hire a contract expert to make sure that we as a small business aren't getting shortchanged, but also just to help facilitate this agreement. And then we also need to hire some part-time people, or maybe on an hourly basis, to help with the day-to-day activities in our startup period, mostly just like doing inventory. In our business right now, we have a really flexible, free business model of like working together. So although we have a hierarchy of management, we decided to make it look more horizontal than vertical, as I'll show in the next slide, because we're more focused on being cooperative rather than being too strongly about the management. So this is our org chart, and I've laid out like the responsibilities in the next slide, so if you want to go through. Nathaniel Worth is our president, but also is in charge of the supply chain. And then we have Jen James, she is the vice president of strategy. Grace Alisa, the vice president of development. Josh Glickman, he is the vice president of finance, and I'm in charge of marketing and human resources. This way we've shared the responsibilities, but also have some sort of chain of command.
All in all, what makes Cconsignment attractive enough to invest in? Why would a TJX representative consider this partnership? Firstly, let's talk numbers. So we're planning on increasing TJX's profits by $600,000 through just 5 stores. And like I mentioned before, this will reach $70 million through our expansion all over America in simply 10 years. And talking about the qualitative benefits, we're providing stylish, unique finds to consumers. We're widening TJX's consumer base by driving college-age women to the stores. We're providing a sustainable way to dispose gently worn clothing. All of us, we're embracing the true treasure hunt experience of TJX. So my question to you is, with all these benefits, why wouldn't you want us?
Any questions?
Sign me up.
Yeah.